material is very, very good. And one thing that I like about the material is that, like I said, for value addition, etc., it's hard for a student, unless you're starting in the third year or so on, to actually trace various sources, look at what the various scholars are saying, what the chronology of cases is. So the material is very rich, I think, and there's revision notes as well. The evaluation was very good. So the evaluation was very balanced. PYQs and the PYQ solutions that your institute provided also helped. That for topics that I couldn't do well, at least I would take the PYQ solutions and make a one pager on things that had been asked.
So today we have a young achiever because it is the first attempt who has cleared UPSC with a very good score. So I'm really glad he has taken UPSC law optional. Welcome to Law Experts MV India. We are really, really happy to have you today.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
And our hearty congratulations, first of all. Before going into the session, let me just introduce myself. I'm Malti here. Welcome, Mr. Ishan.
Ma'am, it's a real pleasure to be here, first of all. And please call me Ishan if that's okay.
Oh,
I'm your student
okay.
after all. And ma'am, I think there are some sacrifices that one has to make, especially in the final 1 or 2 years of preparation. But in my initial years of college, the first 3 years, I was able to do a fair mix of extracurricular and co-curricular activities. From my fourth year, from the second semester of the fourth year, that is 1.5 years, I became very serious about my preparation, and that's when I started in full force. And I graduated in 2023, which is also when I gave the prelims 2023, and I gave that attempt.
Okay, so
Yes,
it
ma'am.
was your first attempt and you started from the fourth year. So
Yes,
that was
ma'am.
it. So can we know about your educational background, your college, all the stuff?
Yes, ma'am. So I did my BA and LB honors from National Law University, Delhi. And before that, I had the PCM stream, but I was very interested in law while I was pursuing law, and constitutional law was one of my favorite subjects. So that also helped, I think.
So we are having few questions which aspirants used to ask me repeatedly. So I have made a small compilation and it is going to be a happy conversation. Okay. So now, so today, like first starting, if we start anything, we will have that fear, right? Where to start? What do we have to do? So when you choose law optional for a person who is starting from first, what he must do?
Uh, Ma'am, so two things. One is, of course, choosing the optional itself. And I think that, of course, has to do something with one's backgrounds, one's strengths, and also looking at the previous year questions and figuring out if one's existing knowledge is suitable or if one can. So there are some things which are peculiar about the law optional, which is that we get asked a lot of theoretical questions and there's a lot of repetition over time. So being able to memorize a lot of cases is very important to be able to write good answers. And I think that should go into the equation as well. I have a friend who took from National Law University Delhi who took sociology because he had trouble with remembering case names. So it really
Oh,
depends on what somebody's strengths are. As far as starting with the optional is concerned, I would recommend that one should really plan based on how much time one has. So I had some issues, personal issues, etc. I couldn't start my optional prep properly except for the 3 months of mains. So I had a very different approach. If somebody has time, they can certainly take some time out to look at the better books, look at, for instance, MP Singh for constitutional law, Ratan Lal and Dheeraj Lal, etc., for torts, criminal law, something for contracts as well. If they don't have time, then they should then try and look at the previous year questions, try and understand what the topics are, and then take on either the Dukki or some coaching material to try and understand what the requirements of the exam are. So that is what I would recommend.
exactly. Fine. Nailed it. Nailed it. Okay. So, like having spoken about these things, how important is previous year questions? Because I see in your list like you have subscribed for previous year questions as well. So you really know you had that, and you know like what is important practically from that what a student can take. So how one should go about that.
I completely agree, ma'am. So previous year questions are extremely important because there is 60 to 70% repetition, not just in law, but across optionals. So one strategy which I saw for some other toppers, I couldn't implement it this attempt. I will do it in the 24 attempt, hopefully. Is to take up previous year questions and to try and make your own model answers as well based on all the knowledge one has. And for topics that are being repeated very often, for instance, mens rea and criminal law, and the law experts' notes actually have this kind of value addition material as well, where you will give certain quotes of certain authors, etc., etc. PYQs help us understand where is it that we need to add that value, where is it that we have to remember multiple authors, multiple cases, etc., because it's not possible for the entire syllabus.
Okay. So having spoken about case laws, yes, case laws are very interesting when we read the books and all. It'll be really interesting, right? But when the thing comes to remembering case laws, how much weightage should an aspirant give in the answer? What do you think for that?
Yeah, so I think that really changes when one's approaching university exams versus the actual optional paper, because university exams are very application driven. So I've never really had to remember a lot of definitions. But there the focus was on if there's a case study of certain injuries and you have to determine whether it's murder or not. I would remember specific evidences from various cases in terms of okay, what were the ligature marks, what kind of injuries were there in those cases, and what would
Mm.
qualify as murder or not. Here, I think there is paucity of time. One has to finish those answers very quickly. So it's very important to know at least two cases per topic. So for any answer, I think the first thing is to explain what the concept is and then to move to a case and say what was pronounced in the case. Now, some people also take this approach, which again I think I'll implement this year, which is that they look at live law and make that slight update of the latest case for a topic. So I think that could be done for the important cases. But ma'am, one to two cases at least to substantiate one's stance is important. For things like basic structure, etc., where there is a chronology, I think it's
Mm.
important to be able to trace that chronology. And I think the one of my college seniors, Soumya Sharma, I think she's Soumya Sharma ma'am, she has one of the highest marks in the law optional. When I looked at her test copies, one thing that was very remarkable was that she had traced the chronology even for torch topics. So for something like causation, we go to what is the yeah, it's incredible because we go to the latest stand because for causation, I believe there was a stance before and then that is slightly changed or something. She traced the origin, she traced the original stance, how it has changed, what it is now as well. I think that
From the
is
lighted script case from
yes,
there, the
ma'am.
general
Yes,
lighted
ma'am.
script in the market from there. Excellent. Okay. So from here, I got the point like, depending upon the demand of the question, if it wants a chronology, you do that. Otherwise, go with two case laws. That would be fine, right? That approach.
Ma'am, I would say that first one should do two case laws because that's all that one can manage. And I think answer writing practice also helps one in figuring out how to introduce these cases and only finish that discussion in a line or two. So that I think is something that comes with practice. Start with two, three. Maybe if the asks you for more, you do more. And then as one gets more comfortable, ma'am, I think we can proceed with being able to mention these cases on the fly in the paragraph format while explaining the point.
Excellent, excellent. And having spoken about answer writing, I see a lot of aspirants, they study very hard, they keep on studying, but never touch any test. I'll be calling them, please do take a test sometimes, okay? So, how important is answer writing? When we should give it? After reading everything, we have to come for answer writing or studying and answer writing, juggle with that? What we should do?
Oh, well, that's a really interesting question, and I think I have regrets on that because I
Okay.
only gave I think two or three tests. That's it. I would say that answer writing is very important, and if people can afford a coaching, they should definitely go for evaluation. Even if they can't, the basic idea is being it's one thing to know enough, but it's another thing to be able to apply that knowledge, and in that 10-minute mark or a 7-minute mark, being able to translate or transcribe that knowledge into the real answer. That is the real challenge. I would say that as soon as one has done let's say one has finished through TOTS, we can try and give a test for TOTS immediately afterwards. One doesn't have to finish the whole syllabus. And it's good to start it as early as possible. This is something I learned for means. This was my biggest experience in the 2023 mains. You start out as soon as possible with answer writing because that is what tells us that oh, I'm not able to write a very value added or very value rich answer. I'm able to only explain the point of view. So maybe when I look at my notes, I will make a short one pager with all these value additions, some special case, or maybe some author's opinion, etc. And then cram that because I know the principle of voluntary non-fit injury. All I need to do is remember these three, four extra points. That only comes when we orient ourselves to writing answers.
Excellent. Because you stand out. That's what his means is all about, right? Okay, okay. And talking about notes, many students, they all like they have a book, very big book, and they scribble here and there, keep it all together. And at the end of the examination, they'll be like, where to start, ma'am? How would I revise? So, how important is notes making?
I would say that uh, for an exam where one has to deliver a lot of content very quickly, and like you said, when one has to stand out, it's really important to have brief notes, succinct notes, which either give the definitions or the concepts, or maybe if that is something that one has memorized from the book and one is very comfortable with. It also depends on how much time one has. So maybe I've looked at a larger source and I remember the definitions and my concepts are clear. Then just value addition notes in terms of, okay, these are the three limbs of the definition. Per limb, I've just mentioned the limb in a line. And then what is the value addition? What do I have to explain in each of that? Maybe an author's quote, maybe a case law, maybe some recent development. I think at least that should be done because we have to be able to recall this very fast. It can't happen if there's a very long source with multiple cases. So if you look at MP Singh for Article 14 itself, there are so many cases. So that kind of selection has to be there.
Okay, okay, totally understood the point. Done. So, when we talk about notes making, all those stuff, one thing we remember is that in college, one subject, a single day, we finish off and come back. And now we have six subject with us, right? So that revision phase, how was that for you?
It was horrible. I think primarily because it was the 3 months, I made the mistake of, but I think it was a trade off. I think if I had, because of whatever circumstances, if I had done my optional before, I might not have cleared the prelims. So I think for me, it was that gamble. But for me, it was horrible primarily because I did not have enough consolidated sources. I think Law Experts has some excellent notes, but I didn't always have the time to look through them also. So I did it for some subjects, not for the others. I think, like I said, it's very important to have notes and it's very important to know exactly what one wants to put in the answers, especially for questions that are repeated, primarily so that you're not scrambling in that last week. Otherwise, like you said, very big books and you're trying to go through each of these books in six subjects. And CLD is an ocean in itself. It has all of IP. It's unbelievable how large that is. So having consolidated notes and at least having the PYQs figured out is extremely important.
Okay, yeah, previous year questions. That is the thing. When people take law optional, if somebody asks me, I say like any option has its cons and as well as positive things. So, apart from us saying it is better, an aspirant says. So, what do you think is the positive thing about law optional? Practically helped me for prelims, for clearing. This was good for me, something like that.
Okay, yeah. So I think just that insight into polity, a little
Hmm.
bit of insight into governance and ethics as well. So ethics case studies, for instance, this year there was a case study on blood transfusion, and I felt that it was very easy to use the principle of necessity because the case study implied that if you have a transfusion without the proper procedure of law, there's a criminal sanction. But we do know that necessity as a principle in criminal law means that if it's one's own life, somebody else's life, one's own property, someone else's property, you can act in order to save a life or property, and that is exempted. So I think there's a lot of benefit there. The pro, as far as taking the optional is concerned, is that it's very simple. If one has looked at university courses or university question papers, one would realize that law can be very tough. Questions can be very hard. UPSC for the last few years has not been asking hypotheticals. It's very simple. There's a lot of repetition and it's very simple concepts. The problem is, of course, being able to distinguish answers because everybody who's sitting for the exam knows what mens rea is, what that relationship between international law, municipal law will be. That's the hard part.
Oh, awesome. Rightly pointed out. Highly predictable, easy questions. If it is easy for us, that's going to be easy for the other person too. So, how to differentiate yourself? That is the strategy. Exactly. Okay, fine, fine, fine. And any good words, like law experts, you have subscribed for notes, I think, and for the comprehensive plan, videos and previous years. So, like anything good words you have towards law experts, you can please tell us.
Certainly, ma'am. I think the material is very, very good. And one thing that I like about the material is that, like I said, for value addition, etc., it's hard for a student, unless you're starting in the third year or so on, to actually trace various sources, look at what the various scholars are saying, what the chronology of cases is. So the material is very rich, I think, and there's revision notes as well. I do think that when you've got a short timeline, maybe it's not as possible to appreciate the material or use it well. But when one has sufficient time, and one should give at least 2 months to the optional separately, so that you can pick out the important stuff and use it really well, because within a short time one doesn't remember enough and you're not able to perform as well in the answer sheet. So I think take time out, take the notes, and the notes for law optional for law experts from law experts are good.
Okay, fine, fine. And this time we expect a lot of tests to be taken, and we are sure like we will have 2 to 3 people to evaluate that and give you a lot of value additions if and also current affairs. And we'll make sure that your 2024 attempt we give a complete support.
No, looking forward to that. And I think even for 2023, for the little evaluation, because I didn't send the test only, the evaluation was very good. So the evaluation was very balanced, and only things that I could have done better were pointed out. If there was a concept missing, then it was explained on the margin of the paper itself. So that was well, it was done quite well as well. So looking forward to
Oh,
working with law experts this year to improve my rank.
sure, sir. 100% will be right there. And if you have any advice for the aspirants, like you would like to point out, you can give.
Certainly, ma'am. So one thing I said is start before, learn from my mistakes. Before those 3 months, one should have spent at least 2 months on the optional to be able to appreciate the optional, to have those value addition in place. The only reason I could manage was because my concepts were clear, but then my marks aren't that high solely because I couldn't get that value addition in place. So for a lot of subjects, for instance, I could not revise it before the test as well, before the actual optional. It was only because I had read it during my college years that I could write. But I think having those 2 months, then like we discussed, notes, especially notes of whatever new it is that one is adding. And the last is practicing a lot of questions and timed practice. It's ideal to take a test, but for aspirants that cannot afford a test, it's okay to not take it, to look at toppers, answer scripts, etc. I think they're available for free on your portal as well, ma'am. To look at that, to take the same questions and to do time practice, allocating the same time that it would take. Because otherwise, it's always if I take half an hour, I'll obviously write a beautiful answer. But that assessment is very important. Then how much can I write in the time that it takes, 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever.
Obviously, because within that time, your knowledge you process and give an excellent answer, not a bookish one, with current affairs and all those stuffs, and conclude with a very good flow. Right, sir? So, yeah, having spoken about current affairs is really like, will it, how far it is important for UPSC law option?
I think like I said, I think it's very hard to do it across the board. I do think that one year we had a question on emergency arbitrators, which had the Reliance versus Future dispute,
Hmm.
which led to this question last year, I think, in the 2022 paper. We had it in the for paper two. So I think some questions are influenced by current affairs. One can try and cover as much as one can. That's the hard part because there's always new legal developments. There's always new doctrines that are coming in. So I think that is the harder part. The easier part is looking at topics that get repeated and doing current affairs value addition, because you can't go wrong with that. If questions are getting asked repeatedly on some topics, 60-70% of that will be repeated. So there, that value addition, I think, becomes extremely important.
Okay, okay, sir. And any optional will have its cons. So I want students to know their cons also. Yes, this is the problem, and we have to get out of that. So, what was the problem like you faced for having an optional like law? Because many people say like, "Ma'am, syllabus is vast, ma'am, and it is not a good scoring option." All those things they discuss with us. So, what is your say, sir, on this?
Ma'am, I would say that like we just and the two things exactly the two things you mentioned. Syllabus is really vast. Uh, on the scoring point, I would actually like to say I've been speaking to other people who go through for other optionals, and it's not that much of a difference unless it's maths or chemistry or these technical optionals where I think scores go very high. But then again, somebody was telling me there's moderation and that can also go low. But apart from the technical options, if one looks at pol science and sociology and so on, it's not that steep a differential, at least not this year. At least that's what my friends were pointing out. The second thing is that if we look at the success rate, relative success rate of the law optional, it's actually much higher. And this could be due to a variety of reasons, one of which being that only lawyers sit for the law optional. Anybody can sit for sociology or political science, and that is what happens. So there's more people taking it. But the success rate is higher, and that means we have to compete against less people while writing that question. Of course, the large syllabus and the generic nature of the syllabus makes it a bit of a challenge, which is why I advocate preparing beforehand for 2 or 3 months and having those value addition notes in place to distinguish ones.
Excellent, excellent. If the syllabus is fast, like you save that, you will start beforehand. Use the previous year questions. That is the best way. Excellent suggestions. Yes. Okay. Yeah, my questions are done. I'm really happy to have you here. And anything else you would like to add? You want me to ask? I'll ask that.
No, no, no. I don't have anything
You
else
want
to
to
add.
share with your fellow aspirants and all? Anything you can tell me, like you will add that.
No, I think my advice, all that I gave, I think one thing that I might want to add is uh, it's very easy to feel very lost in the journey. And oftentimes things aren't looking very pleasant. So, for instance, my prelims mock scores have always been in the 60s and 70s. This year also, like I've gotten through one year, but when I give full length tests for prelims mocks, my scores are in the 60s and 70s. I'm not very good at remembering pinpoint information. I've never been, even in law school. So that's always a challenge. Similarly, that 1 week was a nightmare between the GS papers and the optional paper. And primarily because I didn't prepare from before. So I think the point I'm making is that things begin to look very, very bad in one's journey, and this happens repeatedly. And it's very, very important for aspirants not to lose hope, to trust their gut, to trust their instincts, and to keep moving forward. Because things also improve, and they improve all of a sudden. I never expected to clear prelims, and then nobody expects the rank on the D day. So I think one has to keep that hope going.
Awesome. Yeah. We used to talk with the aspirants. Yes. One thing is like we feel very difficult here is like keeping people with consistency because UPSC is talent alone is not going to save a person. It is the hard work, talent, as well as the consistency. So how you kept your self motivation? That is a huge thing.
I think, like you said, I think it's just realizing the fact that it's not a university exam. It's not just one night. When there's 6 subjects, and so even in the 3 months that I had, how I was able to manage at whatever level was setting some clear timelines and knowing that if I can make small investments over time, I can do some concepts over time. And this is where the PYQs and the PYQ solutions that your institute provided also help. That for topics that I couldn't do well, at least I would take the PYQ solutions and make a one pager on things that had been asked. So, and have that basic information in place. And that's about an hour of investment per topic. So, I think it's very important to be able to consistently put those investments because otherwise, there's a reckoning at the end of that inconsistency. And it's very, very hard to get through that. So, there are
Yes. Right.
consequences. Yeah.
Later, regrets are the hardest thing a human being can have, right? Okay. Taking a small step a day will really save us. Even that applies to myself. Like self motivate, do something properly each day, like that. Okay, okay. Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking with you and had a great time. Looking forward to the next year coaching and all those things. You will make sure that it is of great use to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am.